Good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome all of you to the July 19th Finance and Audit Committee meeting. I'd like to first recognize that we are gathered on the traditional territory of the Sinixic First Nation. Our clerk this morning will be Ms. Sheila Gurry. Today's Finance and Audit Committee meeting will be held in accordance with the Community Charter and Council Procedure Bylaw 2018, number 7272. The question period sign-up sheet is on the table by the double doors to my left for agenda items only. If during the meeting any member of the gallery has a question relating to agenda item, please write down your name and the agenda item on the sheet. Members have been granted, members of council, to be full and descriptive, have been granted the right to attend the meeting electronically. And we have Councillors Manley, Armstrong, and Brown joining us this morning electronically. Welcome, everyone. First item is the introduction of late items. Ms. Gurry, we have none. That's a good thing. Motion for adoption of the agenda, moved Councillor Thorpe, seconded Councillor Perino. All those in favour? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Motion for adoption of the minutes is circulated, moved Councillor Perino, seconded Councillor Hemmons. All those in favour? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. We have no presentations. We have no delegations. And the first item this morning under reports 7A is the CMHC Housing Accelerator Fund. That sounds exciting. It looks like, Mr. Lindsay, you're going to introduce it, or are we just tossing it to Ms. Brinkman?
Your Worship, just briefly, I'm just going to introduce it. And as you mentioned, we're looking for your support today on submitting what we think is an exciting grant application. And I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Brinkman, who, despite it being her birthday today, is here to give you a brief on the report. So I'll turn it over to her.
Well, there's no gallery people here to criticize the lack of decorum. Let's all sing her happy birthday. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Lisa. Happy birthday to you. And many more till 104. So let's just hope we get the money, eh?
Thank you, everybody. I knew I shouldn't have told Mr. Lindsay about that. Thank you. Okay, so Housing Accelerator Fund, and I might refer to it as HAF as it's being referred to. So the objective of the HAF fund is to provide incentive funding to local governments to encourage initiatives that remove barriers to housing supply, accelerate growth of housing, and support the development of complete communities. So the application deadline is August 18th. They haven't made the application process easy, but I'm going to give you a high-level overview today of what we intend to submit. So to be eligible for the HAF, 3 requirements must be met: establishing a housing supply growth target, an action plan with at least 7 initiatives that promote more housing supply, and the initiatives must be complete by 2026, and a recent housing needs report. So the first requirement being the housing supply growth target. So we are recommending a realistic housing supply growth target for the purpose of this application. We selected a target of 1,175 units, and this target must be met in 2024, 2025, and 2026 to receive the funds if we're successful. So the city's issued building permits for an average of 1,000 units per year in the past 10 years. And so our high years were 2019, recently our high years were 2019 and 2022 with 1,487 units, and in 2022, 1,320 units. But we have had recent low years as well, probably due to COVID, and that was 2020 was 613 units and 2021 was 1,016 units. So there's so many factors that influence the housing market beyond city initiatives. So we picked a safe target. And that way, if we are successful in this grant application, then we will hopefully receive the funds at the end of the day, because we'll achieve the targets is the goal. And if successful, based on the formulas through this HAF program, we would receive just over 15 million is our estimate. And that would get, if we're successful with the application, that gets vetted and reviewed by CMHC. So that's the first requirement. The second requirement is action plan initiatives. So the purpose of the action plan initiatives is to demonstrate that the city is taking active steps to increase housing supply, steps that will have long-lasting impacts. and each initiative must be completed by 2026. So through the integrated action plan process and business plans and our budget process, there were actually quite a few initiatives that were already endorsed by council that we could choose from to make a compelling application. So we've selected 9 initiatives that are in the staff report that seem to best meet the HAP application criteria. And the third requirement was to submit a recent housing needs report. So we were fortunate that was presented to council in June 2023. So that's an easy requirement for us to meet. That can be submitted with the application. So if the application is successful, the funds received, the $15 million, if we're lucky, needs to be used for projects related to increasing housing supply. So what's being proposed that it be used for the Butter Tub Sanitary Sewer Capacity Solution. So we're not sure what that solution is yet, but whatever it is will cost approximately at least $4 million. And so that's one proposal. Also, the Hammond Bay and Turner Road Sanitary Sewer Project, estimated to cost $2 million at this stage. And then also to use funds towards the purchase of properties for affordable and supportive housing. And also the remaining funds towards action plan initiatives. So even though a lot of those initiatives are already in our budget, if we were successful with the application, we could recover those costs and use the monies elsewhere in the city's budget. So these are rough allocation estimates, and if the HAP application is successful, we would report back to council with more details on the recommended allocation and as information comes along. So that's a high-level summary, and we are seeking council endorsement to submit the application to CMHC, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much for the report. Questions from Ms. Brinkman? You know, when you bring happy news to council, it's hard to get them excited. There we go. Councillor Perino, bless you.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to Ms. Brinkman. Is there any reason why we wouldn't go for this? It seems like such a no-brainer to me. It's an excellent grant opportunity and lots of dollars that we can well use. Is there something that you would say, maybe not?
No, I think this is an excellent, through the chair, an excellent grant opportunity. It has taken staff time to do, but we are all the way there pretty much. So we will, if with council support, carry on. And
wonderful.
Yeah, council endorsement is also required as part of the application process.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, and that was my comment, Your Worship. I'd certainly move the recommended motion.
Seconded, Councillor Thorpe. Do you want to speak to it?
No, I think it's if there's no concerns about meeting the goals, and you know the opportunity to have this money come back to us. Wow, you know that would make a big difference for the future. So this is one of those long-term effects that I think is so important, and I really appreciate that you brought it here. It's good.
Thank you, Councillor Himmons.
Thanks, Your Worship. Great report. I fully support. Question. So we have to prove every year that we've met our targets, and then we get a quarter of that funding. Okay, and are we gonna, I've heard Councillor Perino ask, but I need to ask myself, if we're gonna up our units every year, are we gonna have to correspondingly increase human resources to do that?
Yeah,
Not that that's a bad thing, but just let's be really clear about if we're setting higher targets, how are we gonna meet them?
Yeah, through the chair. So with the CMHC fund, you know, we asked the question of how far back in time can we do this average? So they said there is no limit. So if we go back 10 years, the average is 1,000 units per year. But really, in the last 5 years, we are getting quite close to the 1,175. So I think we're being strategic by choosing an average over the 10 years so that we can be successful. So we're setting ourselves up for success for the next 3 years because we have met those units in, you know, off and on in the last 5 years. So I think with the current staff resources, that's still possible. And we've selected action plan initiatives as well that we're kind of already on the books to do, so we're not adding extra burden. Okay. That was the goal of this.
That's part of the reason why this is so great. I do have a further question, if I may, and that's about the allocation of the funds of the HAF application if successful. So given that number one is the Butter Tub Sanitary Sewer Capacity Solution, Given that we don't yet have a solution, we're working on it, is that the first appropriate place to put the funds? And further to that, as I'm looking at number 3, is the purchase of properties for affordable and supportive housing, which we know we need right now, and that's $8.8 million. I know we're not going to get, that would take 2 years to accrue of annually meeting our targets, but if you could just flesh out for me the rationale for the prioritization of where we would put the funding and when, that would be great. Thank you.
Through the chair. So I don't know if, Mr. Sims wants to speak to the Buttertub sanitary sewer solution and selecting that project.
Mr. Sims, back to basics this morning. What's underground?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through the chair to Councillor Hammond's question, it's a good one because with the recent announcement by the province that they're funding a number of units at VIU, the sanitary sewers all flush to what we call the Buttertubs lateral. It's a sewer that runs around Buttertubs Marsh and eventually dumps into the Millstone Trunk sewer. It's at its capacity limit at the moment, and so with the new housing units coming on in the next 2 or so years, we need to sort of be in front of that with the sewer before they start flushing toilets. Essentially, that's a high priority, and the funding for typical DCC growth-related projects in the sewer DCC fund specifically is we can't keep up with the growth that's sort of happening all over the city. So this is really an appropriate place to seek funding from.
Okay.
Similarly with the Hammond Bay area as well.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Harding, were you wanting to? Sorry. Anything from anyone else? Not seeing any. I happen to agree. It's fairly ambitious, but on the other hand, consistent with what I've been saying for a long time, everyone that's discovered us, the start of the fast ferry is not going to slow growth and development in the city. So we may find, in fact, that our target may be a little lacking in ambition as it bears out. Unfortunately, that's the same with predictions around the level of climate change, which is accelerating past what many have predicted too. So we'll see this is a good news story. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you very much, Ms. Brinkman. The next 7B, the update of reserve policy and minimum balances. Good morning, Ms. Mercer, hiding behind the screen there.
Yeah. Sorry about that. We'll have it removed at some point. We have two areas to update in the reserve policy. The first is the addition of the new Growing Communities Fund, reserve fund. And this was a requirement to receiving the grant money. So if you recall, back in March, we got about just a little over $16 million. And a requirement of that is that we put it in a statutory reserve fund. So the policy needed to be updated to include this new reserve. And the second area is minimum balances. So the city's reserve policy also outlines a number of reserves with minimum and maximum balances, and these balances are to be reviewed every 5 years. So the 3 financial stability reserves have identified both a minimum and maximum balances for each, and best practice outlines that we should have 45 to 90 days of expenditure budgets kept in reserve to cover any unanticipated expenses. So with the start of the 2024 to 2028 financial plan, it was noted that the general and sewer financial stability reserves will fall below that minimum 45 days based on the current minimum balances of, we have $15 million in the general and $500,000 in the sewer reserves. So staff are recommending that the 3 minimum balances or the minimum balances for these 3 reserves be increased to $17 million for the general, $600,000 for the sewer, and $1,750,000 for the water financial stability reserve. And this is approximately about 49 days of expenditures. So with expenditures increasing each year, this should cover us for a few years, so we wouldn't have to increase it for a few years. And the top-ups for these reserves will come from the 2023 surplus. And if that isn't sufficient, we will build a repayment into the upcoming budget cycle. So staff are requesting that the committee adopt the changes in the reserve policy, and I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Thank you very much. Councillor Thorpe?
Thank you, Your Worship. If there's no questions at this time, I'm happy to move the recommendation, and I'll speak briefly to it.
A second to Councillor Hemmons. Councillor Thorpe, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to staff, thank you very much, Ms. Mercer, for this report. To me, this is being proactive and recognizing the unusual inflation that we've experienced in the last couple of years. I think there's, in our community, some degree of misunderstanding always about the use of reserves and the necessity of having healthy stable reserves. So I certainly appreciate this and support it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Perino?
Just a quick question. I am in favor of this. However, we do not need to take from taxpayer dollars at this time.
Through your worship to Council Perino, at this time, we would just take it from surplus. We don't have to add at this point.
Perfect.
We're assuming we'll have enough surplus to cover the.
Excellent, excellent, thank you.
Thank you very much, and I can't resist referring to what I always refer to as a teachable moment. This is an example of what the staff at the city do to ensure that the citizens of Nanaimo get the services they need in a timely way, that we don't run into financial crises and not have the pennies in the bank to pay for whatever faces us. So I just want to use this, as I say, an opportunity, a teachable moment to thank staff for keeping ahead of all of this, and as Councillor Thorpe noted, being proactive and assisting us to make sure that some future council doesn't find itself in the glue because this council either paid no attention or didn't listen to the wise advice of staff. So thank you. Motion's been made. I'm not seeing any questions. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Councillor Brown's opposed. Sorry. Councillor Brown's opposed.
I'm opposed. Yep.
Thank you. You're just a tiny little person on the screen this morning. I hate to say, we're going to have to expand you a little. The next is 7C, Midtown Water Supply Upgrade 2024 Budget Update. Mr. Sims.
Thank you, Your Worship. Good morning. And this is another example of maybe a bit of proactivity. So typically with multi-year large projects, we update the budget for the following year as part of our normal budgeting process. And that's presented as part of the financial planning process. In this particular case, the project is quite large, has had quite an impact on our water reserves, and we're getting low in the water reserves. I think I mentioned earlier, Ms. Fulla commented that, in hindsight, this project should have been or could have been funded by borrowing, and it would have spread the cost out. However, here we are, and right now, with reserves this low, we're proposing and planning for the 2024 budget for an additional $4.5 million, $4.6 million, which buys us certainty to the end of the project. So we now know the costs until the end of the project. So for the next 18 months, we have that solidified. So given that the reserves are tight, if we took all of that additional funding required from the reserves, we'd get down uncomfortably close to the minimum balance. Staff are suggesting that we could look at, council could elect to dedicate some of the money from the Growing Communities Fund, which is intended to support growing communities. But this is also, a nice reserve to have for other priorities. So we're presenting these three options at sort of varying levels of use of that particular reserve fund, and $500,000 approximately of that $4.6 million is required or is funded from DCCs, and the remaining $4.1 million would need to be made up from either a combination of reserves and the Growing Communities Fund, or one or the other, is how the report reads. So the recommendation from staff is $2.1 million from the Growing Communities Fund and approximately $2 million from water reserves. The other options presented are one or the other, and I suppose that we can tweak one way or the other as well, but this is how it's presented. Mr. Squire's here to answer questions if there's any sort of more detailed commentary. I would note that reporting out on the entirety of the project's cost of 55.9. That's right from the very start, right to the very end, including all of the ancillary projects that we're sort of picking up along the way. So the water supply portion is quite large, of course, but we're also doing a bunch of storm drainage, a bunch of water distribution, some smaller networks, and the trailway alongside the parkway. So that it's all sort of incorporated into that cost. It's not all, it's driven by the water supply project, but it's multiple infrastructures that we're dealing with here. Thanks, Your Worship.
Thank you very much. And I don't wish to cast any doubt on your optimism, but given this project, I don't have great confidence that we won't see some further requests potentially down the road, Mr. Sims. I mean, this is a major undertaking.
Well, I may ask Mr. Squire to comment further, but this is committed cost till the end of 2024. We have, barring something crazy, of course, that little asterisk at the bottom, but this is the committed cost. We know what the cost will be by the end of 2024. We know we have the pipe supply secured. We've got fuel and contract labor and equipment all secured until the end of 2024. So this is not, we didn't think about this, we didn't think about that. We've thought about it all, barring, as I say, something absolutely crazy.
All right, thank you. In order, Councillors Manley and Hammond, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a question for staff. I'm actually really glad to hear that all the costs have been locked down in terms of the materials and supplies and labor, etc. I'm curious about how much is in the Growing Communities Fund, and so what will be left after if we choose option one and put 2.1 million into this project.
Through Your Worship to Councillor Manley. So we used about $3 million to go towards the turf field, and so this would be 2.1 for this so we'd have about, that's 5 million, so we'd have about 6 or 11 million left.
11 million, that's great. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you. This isn't necessarily about the report, but just my understanding of the project. So, Mr. Sims, this $55 million project wasn't on the books, or at least it wasn't on the books for several years in advance. Is that correct? Okay, so we're advancing these costs now because we had a major infrastructure failure.
That's exactly right, and Your Worship, I appreciate Councillor Hammond's point. This was quite a large shift in our capital planning. This project was on the books for later in our capital plan, with the massive break on Bowen Road, the impact to the hospital and emergency services, let alone the citizens all across the community. This was a kind of a rejigging entirely of the capital plan. And it's actually perhaps a good example of why healthy reserves are needed. Right? If we didn't have those healthy reserves, we couldn't have accelerated a number of these projects. So, as well as shifting and delaying for other projects, this is the highest risk, the highest priority. So we're addressing it. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And if I may just, I'd like to flag, I had the same question as Councillor Manley, and I think when we're talking about the Growing Communities Fund, it would be great if we're talking about drawing down from it to have an understanding of what's already committed from it and what our remaining balance might be, because I'm sure that's a fund we're going to look at for so many things. So I just want to make sure we're being very strategic about it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't see any other questions. We have a recommended motion moved by Councillor Perino. Seconded Councillor Hemmons. Councillor Perino, you wish to speak to it?
No, Your Worship, I think just to say that we're always going to have to deal with the emergencies. There's no doubt about it. So I really appreciate Councillor Hammond's questions about, we need to know what's there and be ready, and this is an opportunity. I thank Mr. Sims for the excellent work that you've done, and it's good. Thank you. I'll be voting in favor.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Comments? Not seeing any. All those in favor? And any opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. Thank you very much. The next is 7D, Sponsorship Policy, Inventory Development and Valuation for the City of Nanaimo. Mr. Harding, Acting CEO, General Manager, Parks, Recreation and Culture. Good morning.
Good morning, Worship and Council. First of all, before I start, I just want to recognize my new right-hand man, aide de camp, Mr. Lindsay, that's here to assist me in anything I need to go get or anything for me. So if you're wondering why he's sitting beside me to my right, that's the symbolic aspect of it.
Thank you, Mr. Harding.
So, Your Worship, we're bringing back to you the sponsorship program. We did allow Council a couple months. We introduced it with the consultants 2 months ago, allowed Council to digest it. There's a lot of material. It is a change in how we do things if we proceed with a full sponsorship program, which is not what staff are recommending at this time. But what we are recommending is approval of the policy. We think the policy is something we've not had as a city ever, this type of detailed policy. Councils do get requests for naming. They also get requests for sponsorship types of requests, be it in our facilities that we run ourselves or facilities that we own, but work with our partners like the Port Theatre, this facility, and so forth. So we do believe or support strongly proceeding with the policy. Also, a lot of work has been conducted by the consultants, so we do recommend receiving all the documents. One document we don't show for specific reasons is the actual detailed valuation that was done on all of our assets, and that is available for council and camera if they wanted to see that, but we keep the valuation separately. And third, we do recommend, there are some opportunities and there's also some outstanding work we need to do, particularly for the Vancouver Island Conference Centre. Namings of some of the assets in this building have now have come to the end. Those naming, particularly this building, the room we're in right now, is Shaw Auditorium. So we do recommend that council approve that staff come back with a pilot project that will outline costs and potential revenues to go for a sponsorship program for the Vancouver Island Conference Centre, as well as what we call the Stadium District. And that would be all of our sports venues in the Stadium District, as well as the Aquatic Centre and the Ice Centre. Again, that doesn't change any of the existing names of the facilities that are there, but it does allow us to go out and look at a potential sponsorship program for that area. And again, there's a lot of material. I don't have the consultant here today to answer some of those detailed questions, but I do believe we can answer most of council's questions regarding the program.
Thank you very much, Mr. Harding. Questions, Mr. Harding? Councillor Perino?
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to Mr. Harding. So would these, in fact, go through the province as what happens with other naming opportunities for the hospital? I'm not sure. I didn't see it in here, but I may have missed it. I was racing. So when you do naming opportunities through sponsorships, donations, whatever, do you put the names through the province?
Your Worship, to Council Perino, no. Council has full authority over any naming of your assets, city's assets.
So how long is the naming opportunities for?
So Your Worship, Council Perino, that's the aspect with the true sponsorship program.
Yes.
Is we'll go for an RFP. We'll provide bidders options. If they do 5 years, it's going to cost so much. 10 years, it'll cost so much.
Okay.
20 years, it'll cost so much. But what there will be is there'll be some details with that with completion. So they're not going to get it forever. It'll always be an end date on any of the sponsorship program namings.
And you've not done this before, did I hear you correctly? This is new for you to do it this way?
Your Worship, Council Perino, again, we've had naming done at specific facilities, but not with a detailed policy like that's included in this policy, which helps guide council and staff in working on projects that do come forward. So this provides some clear guidelines. And then, of course, as we go out to pretend whatever year it is, the market will drive what that program would be and what kind of funds council could see retrieved.
It's an excellent way to involve the community and help the community to be a part of the future growth. I think that's incredible in itself. This is a very generous area. And it's amazing to me how people are just right there to help because they want to see good things for the community. So this is appropriated. Whenever you're ready, I am prepared to move the motion.
One question from Councillor Manley, and then I'll go back to you for the motion. Councillor Manley.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a comment about the policy itself under section 5.4.3. It excludes a number of things like weapons, tobacco, cannabis, sexual services, etc. And then companies that promote or sell alcohol or potentially other addictive substances. So I'm glad to see that because I'd hate to see us promoting a pharmaceutical company that produces opioids. I would like to see other addictive or unhealthy substances at venues geared primarily towards children and youth, because we see a lot of very unhealthy products used to promote athletics when they're the last thing an athlete would consume. Thinking about colas and sugary drinks that have no nutritious value at all. And the other thing I would like to see in here is prohibiting companies that contribute to climate change as their primary business. So those are just some of my comments about this. I would hate to see us promoting companies involved in gas fracking or oil exploration when we're in a climate crisis. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Gesselbrock.
I think Councillor Manley raises some good points. There's one specific one in the policy, and I think it says that we would not support sponsorship of cannabis products and tobacco, but with alcohol, we would support sponsorship, but not in areas where youth were at. And I just learned an interesting thing is that alcohol is actually a class 1 carcinogenic, and the World Health Organization has come out with new guidelines, and not even like small amounts is considered, healthy. I think that was a bit of a trend a little while ago, and I don't see why, if cannabis is, prohibited, why we wouldn't just prohibit alcohol. I do think that is a bit of a double standard based on probably older cultural beliefs, and given the amount of issues that alcohol does cause, I think that it's probably inconsistent to have that. So that would be an immediate amendment that I would ask to have in the policy. And then I think the question begs to ask, where does that stop? You could make a similar argument for colas and aspects like this. And so where do we draw the line on what's healthy, not healthy? And it just can go on forever. I think that goes back to maybe some concerns I have with sponsorship in general. My gut is not to support something like this to begin with. The only perspective that has swayed me is Councillor Prino's, very positive narrative around highlighting local businesses that want to contribute. And I think looking at a policy that, how would we highlight local businesses that want to contribute and have their names up? I don't think that's a negative thing, and I think that could be an aspect of economic development. But does our policy distinguish against, a large multinational soft drink company being a large sponsor, or whatever companies that may be much larger? Do we need to be highlighting them? I don't think so. And so as the policy stands now, I think more work needs to be done on it before I could support it. Those are my thoughts at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Harding.
Your Worship, just to add a little bit of detail to Councillor Gesselbrecht's points. So this is Council's policy, and a lot of the issues that Councillor Gesselbrecht mentioned, Council can change at any time. Also, because of the way funding would go, Council would have final say on any group or business that did come in front of council. Again, we can't, it would be difficult to list every potential business of council would not want to deal with, and unless council wanted to actually have a policy that says we're not going to do sponsorship at all, and then you write that in, which is an opportunity for council to have. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that. I would recommend you'd have something that if somebody does come to you with an idea or sponsorship that all of council agrees with, you then have some criteria to proceed with that sponsorship. But again, the policy can also be changed and amended. So as things progress, certain businesses come forward or certain services that council is not comfortable with, council can amend this policy at any time and include those businesses that council is not comfortable with dealing with.
Ms. Gurry.
Thank you, Worship. Mr. Harding basically covered it. I just wanted to make the point that it is a council policy. It is amendable at any time. Council can amend it. And as Mr. Harding noted, it would at least give that base criteria and guidelines to get started. And the final say and okay would come to council for approval. So but Mr. Harding made all those points, I think.
Thank you very much, Councillor Thorpe, Councillor Gesselbrock, and then back to Councillor Crino.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Thank you, Mr. Harding. Appreciate the information. I'm going to support this as a general, what I'll call first step in this direction. Since my involvement on council and commission before that, we've had several requests for naming opportunities, some of them involving individuals. And I'm not sure how that fits in or would fit into our policy, but I know it's always been a little bit of a gray area in terms of criteria, and I think it is important that we start to get a policy in place. In terms of specifics and individual situations, as you've pointed out, council will have the opportunity to discuss those. I wouldn't want to stand in the way of this policy simply because there might be some specific sponsor opportunities that I would not support. And I think you could probably make an argument for just about any major corporation in the world for not supporting them. So I think you have to look at those individually when they come up. But I think this is an opportunity for the city, and I think we should take this first step and see where it leads us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gesselbrock, Councillor Crino, and then Councillor Manley.
Thanks, Your Worship. So just with the specifics of the policy, it's clear that sponsorship above 40K would come to council for determination, and then things under that, I can't remember exactly, 25 to 30 or 20 to 30 is CAO, and then the directors have say, and then anything smaller basically is the discretion of either a consultant or the staff member that will be responsible for this as this thing rolls out. Is it basically just for 40, and it would be totally ungainly to manage if council had a say on, all the different folks that would be interested in it, but as it stands now, it's just sponsors above 40K that council would have a say on, correct?
Your Worship, Councillor Gesselbrock, that's what the policy says right now is a threshold. Again, that can be changed, but also anything that requires a renaming. So regardless of the price or the sponsorship program, anything that's required a renaming, even if it's a rename of a bench, it would come to council. But typically, it's a renaming of any asset would come to council, regardless of the threshold. The funding threshold would be other programs. It could be a special event. It could be a small program that's sponsored through, say, swimming programs or something that's well under that threshold. And that's the overall threshold, not the yearly threshold. That would be the life of the sponsorship. So say if there's a 5-year program, and if it's over 40,000, those would come to council. If over 5 years it's well under that, we put that threshold at 40,000. Again, if council's not comfortable with that, it could be a different threshold.
Right, okay. And so the process for amending this would be that we would bring amendments to, could be today, but we'd bring them forward. Could we have this reappear, depending on where the decision goes today on whether we go ahead with council at a committee meeting where we could, put some amendments onto the table to adjust it?
Your Worship, Council Kesselbrecht, if Council has it handy, look at section 6.6 and 6.7. 6.6 is on an evaluation criteria of the programs. With that would be an ethical scan of anything over $3,500. So we'd do an ethical scan. We would have to outline to Council the details of what that ethical scan would provide, but Council would have that. And then on the review, it's recommended that the first 2 years of startup, this policy is reviewed in 2 years.
Right. I mean, we'll have sponsors locked in by that for a 5-6 year period, potentially, if there's renaming. So I'm just thinking in the short term, what could be an opportunity to suggest amendments and have that adjusted other than today?
So, Your Worship, if I could, and Ms. Greenwell can add to it. So we have it today at Finance and Audit. You can make recommendations now for changes before it goes to Council, or you can make changes when it goes to Council. Or you can ask us to go back and make some specific changes and come back to you again. This is a big program and it is a change. So we recognize that. That's why, again, we offered it in May for a chance for Council to digest the details with it. I'll just add to one aspect about the lock-in. So every sponsorship has a kick-out clause, for lack of a better word, for both the sponsor and the city. And they'll have a variety of clauses that Council can cancel sponsorship if something occurs or Council has concerns over that program. So there are ways of getting out of the sponsorship program.
Great. Yeah, maybe not an ideal process, to have to go backtrack on that. I think, we could do a little bit of work up front. And it looks like there could be some opportunity to do that. And my other question is today with the recommended motions, when would we do the final decision in terms of, like, there were some choices between having a consultant go out and do it, the city going doing it itself, or and then if we did a consultant, how we'd pay them, be it a set fee or a hybrid between commission and that. When's that decision point? I'm just not clear. Is that today?
Your Worship, Councilor Kesselbrecht, thank you for that question, because that's a good one. That's the really compiled in recommendation 3, that we would come back to Council with a pilot program that would spell out some of those options. Again, staff's not recommending that we go full in with a staffed or consulted full sponsorship program, because we know there's some steps we need to do, but we also know that the Vancouver Island Conference Centre provides a quick opportunity for Council to explore some sponsorship. The Stadium District also provides that, but if nothing else, the Vancouver Island Conference Centre does. So we will come back to you with a pilot project, be it a RFP or a call for interest that would spell out some of those details, be it percentage of the sale or a fixed fee or a combination of fixed fee. But we would recommend that we contract that out at this point in time for these 2 projects.
Okay.
But we would be coming back to Council with the details of that.
The details of that, okay. And then when you'd come back from Council to be able to go out with the pilot project, do you need to have, like, say if we deferred approving the policy today or for the next Council meeting, would that be a barrier to putting together the pilot at this moment? You basically need the okay with the policy to go ahead with putting together options for a pilot.
Your Worship, Councilor Kesselbrecht, the policy really helps give staff the framework of what Council's comfortable with going out with a pilot project and not comfortable with. So that's why the policy is recommended, is that it sets some criteria and some things that we're not going to go out for, or things that councils really want us to go out for. And also, we just wanted some clarification based on Councillor Thorpe's question. So This is a true sponsorship program. It's not a naming program. It's so if things are named after individuals, that council still has that right and authority to do totally separate. Or if there's a benevolence type of program, which I think Councilor Perino's talking a lot about, if someone wants to donate so much money for a particular name. However, even on those two, council, at least if this policy is in place, can refer to it when those requests come in. So if you have a request to name an asset after an individual, or someone wants to donate substantial funds to an asset, and council wants to name it after that person or organization, again, you have a criteria to measure those separate but related requests to this policy.
Thanks.
Ms. Gurry, you're okay?
Yes, I'm okay, Your Worship. I think I just wanted to make the point that council can make a motion and or request staff bring back a policy for amendment at any time. So that's something. And just Councillor Manley has his hand raised.
Yes, Councillor Perino's next, I think, but we'll let Councillor Manley go first if that's all right.
Sure.
Thank you. Councillor Manley.
Thank you, Your Worship. I support the policy in principle, and I support the idea of sponsorship in general. I just want to be cautious about the wording in our policy, and so I think I will be coming back at some point with some suggestions, and to be clear that we don't find ourselves in a position where we did with a recent proclamation that. I appreciate 6.6 that we're going to be doing ethical scans before we have sponsorship agreements, and I think I'd like to know what those ethical scans look like, so a little more in-depth information about what an ethical scan would include. I really appreciate Councillor Gesselbrock's point and Councillor Perino's point about local sponsorship and really promoting local businesses, because it's part of the circular economy and keeping money flowing in our local economy to support local businesses that hire local and source local. So yeah, I'm gonna support this in principle right now, and then look at some future amendments to the program. But I would like to see staff start to move forward with opportunities for the Vancouver Island Conference Centre. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Perino.
So, Councillor, sorry, Your Worship, I'd like to move the motion and then speak to it if I get a seconder.
Yes. Seconded, Councillor Thorpe, moved by Councillor Perino. Councillor Perino.
Thank you, Your Worship. Point number 3 of this recommendation said direct staff to develop a pilot project, which was for me an excellent statement that we can offer suggestions, we can bring it forward, and it certainly answers to some of Councillor Gesselbrook's concerns, which I value. That the point that I want to say is, just about everything we eat, drink, whatever we do is bad for you, and the truth of it is, it's kind of tough to say, but the truth of it is that sugar is in fact a healthy product. The problem is if you have too much. And I just need to make an advertisement for today, because unfortunately I wasn't able to go given my recent injury, but Tim Hortons has their camp day today. And what they did this morning from 7 until 10 was that they honor, they give a portion of their proceeds towards their camp day so that children get to go to camp who wouldn't normally go. Now, I can tell you that if you eat too much Tim Hortons, you're going to be really sorry of what it does to your body. Having said that, a small amount of Tim Hortons is an excellent product, and they're an incredible business, incredible staff, and the owners of the Nanaimo businesses here are just, I can't rave enough about them, and so I hope everybody's rushing out today to go and have a Tim Hortons coffee and donut, because what that will do for some children to be able to go to camp. So, when we talk about sponsorships, we're talking about sponsorships like Tim Hortons. You could not ask for finer companies than the ones we have here in Nanaimo and around this region. So I'm definitely in favor of this. And I agree with Councillor Gesselbrook. We need to be very concerned about who's coming forward, but I can tell you, given my experience, we wouldn't have the maternity ward, the emergency department, surgical suites, the new ICU without the support of our communities, businesses, and individuals. So I celebrate this 100%.
Thank you very much. You know, this debate is hardly original, and I don't mean that in a dismissive way. The concept that government regulates, prohibits, restricts, whatever, substances that are consumed in society or used regularly has been with us for a long time versus those who say, let the public make their own choices. If they choose to go to McDonald's or buy a big gas-sucking SUV as opposed to a Ford Fiesta or something much smaller that consumes less gas, or ride electric bicycles, whatever the case may be. We're always stepping into the weeds of that debate, and for me the question is how far we want to go into the weeds. For instance, I mean, the policy as proposed says addictive substances at venues geared primarily to children and youth. Councillor Perino's point this morning around McDonald's. Look at all those nice sports teams in town that are sponsored by Tim Hortons or McDonald's or various other large corporate enterprises that operate largely through franchises. You know, there's a lot of parents and sports-minded people in this community who might take great objection to this council saying sorry, but if they want to pay a substantial sum of money to the city to help us support all kinds of other services, that they can't do it because it's aimed at children and youth. I mean, when I think of pop, I don't drink much soda, I guess is the proper term nowadays. But I bet you there's not a person in this room who didn't have some sainted mother or father when their tummy was upset who didn't give them ginger ale as a child. It's all a question of how far we're prepared to go. I don't want to lengthen this debate today. I'm going to say simply this. Staff have covered this off rather nicely, in my respectful opinion, in terms of the evaluation, 6.6, and review for the first 2 years. This is a step. Let's go forward. We'll see what the community response is. We'll see if we get anybody who's actually interested in doing this. I suspect, you know, Chevron may not be jumping forward to seek an sponsorship opportunity, but maybe Shaw Cable will again, or Rogers or whoever. So I want to thank staff for the work that's been done to date and the consultants that we've used in this, but I think it's time to get this policy in place, see how it plays out, and as Mr. Harding has pointed out, ultimately the major decisions that might prove controversial or might actually have some impact on our community will be made by council at some future time. So all those in favor? Councillors Hemmens, Mayor Krogh, Councillor Thorpe, Councillor Perino, Councillor Manley, Councillor Armstrong, and those opposed, Councillor Gesselbrock and Councillor Brown. Motion carries. Thank you very much. And the next item is E, the allocation of BC Destination Development Funds to stadium upgrades. Mr. Harding, please.
Thank you, Worship. This is a little housekeeping. Council was, and the public was made aware that we were successful in getting $1 million grant that was from the Destination Development Funding Program. We won the grant based on application to improve parking, accessibility, and other amenities for the stadium district, but particularly for Quinnipiac Stadium. And we just need to add those funds into and amend the financial plan so the funds could be allocated appropriately.
Thank you very much. Moved by Councillor Hemmens, seconded Councillor Thorpe. Any need for discussion? At this point, I just want to say thank you, Mr. Harding, for this, and thank you and those who've worked with you and others in the community over the years. 20 or 30 years from now, and Councillor Thorpe's going to follow me, people will look at that stadium district and say it is one of the most impressive facilities in the city of Nanaimo, and the tourism community and sports tourism and all of the things that flow from it, let alone the good health that flows from athletic activity. People will look back and say this was absolutely just this small decision today, just part of an ongoing program and process to make that the attractive area it is. So my compliments. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. Very briefly, yes, I agree with you, and I just wanted to point out, in my opinion, how appropriate this is, destination development funding for an area of our city which really has become a destination attraction for many groups, and we see that later on in our agenda regarding track and field. So totally support this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm not seeing any other questions. All those in favor? And any opposed? Not seeing any. Motion carries. Thank you. The next is F, Island Roots Market Cooperative Report. Mr. Harding, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. And first, apologies for myself for the getting this a little late. This was initially requested back in October. Staff actually had the report ready in the spring, but given other agenda items, we moved it a little bit further along. But this is a response to a delegation council had not last October. It provides an information of some of the questions that the delegation had, of which we've been working with that organization and we continue to. But if there's any questions or comments regarding the report back, we're pleased to answer. Ms. Osborne is also here to answer any questions on it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Harding. For what it's worth, I'm not seeing anybody right now, but I just want to say thank you to you and your folks. You know, the market has grown substantially over the years, and it's a very important part of the community. I'm delighted to see the report. Councillor Gesselbrock.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. Thanks for the report. Just a question. Are they keeping the market hours? Like, is it changing at all, the market hours? Are they in there from Wednesday to 3 to 6 still, or?
Yeah, Your Worship, Councillor Gesselbrock, my understanding is that they're keeping the hours.
Okay.
I also like to just remind Council, we mentioned it, I think it was last Finance and Audit, we'd be coming to Council with an update to this Council on Bevan Park Master Plan implementation, which will also address some of those user needs and opportunities from implementation, some of the facility requirements at Bevan Park. And we'll hopefully do that early fall.
Great, and with the signage in that, is the city assisting with signage outside of it? It was mentioned that those things were discussed with them. I just wasn't clear in terms of what was determined.
Yeah, Your Worship, Councillor Gesselbrock, again, some of the requests were for highway signage, so we've been trying to help them connect with Ministry of Highways for the specific requirements. And I think that's ongoing, and we continue to check in with them. On the actual signage on site, I can't remember, we've done some temporary work with them, and we'll continue to work on we have some limitations of how many fixed signs we're allowed to put at Bevan Park. So, but we definitely have the event day signage, as well as promoting it on our reader boards and other ways.
So it sounds like on most requests there was some agreement moving forward. Really, the only thing that we can't do for them is give them a break on the fees. And but if they do want to apply for a grant, yeah, then they can so do so.
Your Worship, and to Council, absolutely, that's the area of fees and charges. We've just gone through Council and how that's determined. As other groups have required grants or requested grants from Council, a lot of time those grants are going to go towards offsetting fees and charges.
Great, thanks for that.
Thank you. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm sorry, but I can't resist making a comment here because I do support the Island Roots Market and support it financially as well as theoretically, or at least my wife does. But when the market came to us last October, I have to say, in all honesty, I felt they made some statements which were a little bit unfair toward the city and somewhat critical. And I think this report points out that the city, again, in my opinion, and Mr. Harding can comment if he wishes, I think the city has been very supportive over the years of the market and tried to assist them as much as possible in many different aspects of their operation. So I think some of what they said, to be honest, was unfair. And I think this confirms that we are being very supportive as a city. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thorpe. Councillor Manley.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to thank staff for the report, and I'm looking forward to the master plan for Bevan Park and continuing discussion. Some people might think that a farmer's market is a special interest group, but we all eat, and we're seeing the price of food go up all over the place, and we get most of our food from California. And anybody who's been down to California to see the droughts and the extreme weather that they're dealing with and depletion of their aquifers would quickly understand that we need to be supporting local farms and local food as much as possible for our own sustainability and well-being in this community. So just wanted to say I'm looking forward to the master plan, and I'm thankful that staff is working with the co-op to keep this farmers market going. I think it's an important part of the community and has been for the last 10 years. I'm not sure what was said at the last meeting that Councillor Thorpe is referring to, but I think going forward, we should work on continuing to build positive relationships with this cooperative. Thank you.
Thank you. The next is G, Caledonia Park Practice and Security Lighting Funding Request. Mr. Harding, it's really your show today, isn't it?
It is. I like it. Your Worship, just bringing council an opportunity. Opportunities is for two things that have come about with building the 2 artificial turf fields at Harewood. Is we had some lighting equipment, particularly the poles, that were salvageable to utilize in 2 projects. 6 poles were taken down, 3 were sent to the Stevie Smith Bike Park to light that up through working with the Stevie Smith Foundation. But we also have some other poles that could be used now to light up some natural turf fields. And the artificial turf fields have now provided opportunities to light our natural turf fields. Historically, before artificial turf, we had to keep the natural turf fields, some of them, ready for game days, which was usually on weekends. And that's why a lot of them aren't lit up. Bem Park Fields, Caledonia, some of the others had to be not used for practice, but for games. Now most games are being played on the artificial turf fields. We now have opportunities to light up some of our natural turf fields for practices. The Raiders have moved over to their training program from Comox 2 years ago over to Caledonia, which we've encouraged. And this opportunity allows us to add 6 poles. We have the 3, we'd add 3 more, which gives lighting and security options to Caledonia Park. There's an image on the screen now for council's consideration. Or we could just do the 3, and with this option 2 is just to do the 3 lights and some security lighting. I know it's a mid-budget time to come for a project like this, but we have an opportunity to have these poles and lights up for the park prior to the fall practice schedules and the change of light.
Thank you very much. Councillor Manley, question?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I support this this proposal. I see that there's security lighting on the concession area, the washrooms, but not on the locker room and not on the tower. So I'm wondering about adding those items. And I know that some of these break-ins that the Raiders have experienced are fairly sophisticated operations. You know, involved trucks and the stealing of gear that you know, somebody would have to have some kind of inside line on selling. It's not something you would see sold on the street because it's very specialized equipment that's been stolen. And I'm wondering about the possibility of installation of alarms where the equipment is stored to ensure that they don't have to keep on going through this. I've seen just the reports and yeah, I think that we need better security in the park. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Mr. Harding?
Thank you, Worship, and thank you to Councillor Manley. So we are working with the Raiders on a couple of security options. One is the alarms as well as potential cameras. So we're working with them on that, and we do think there's a phased approach to this, getting some practice light and some security lighting on the field, and having some directional lighting off the poles to the change rooms, and it can also be to the tower. Will be of assistance. We will look at some continued options to light up the other facilities as we can, if that answers Council Manley's question.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Perino.
Your Worship, if I could just have a question through you to Mr. Harding. If we agree to this motion today, the recommendation the recommended motion today. This will be done in time for September, particularly as the light, yes?
Your Worship, to Councillor Perino, yes, and again, my apologies for coming late into the budget cycle, but if we can get this approved, we feel we can get the polls up and ready for fall practice.
Thank you, and Your Worship, I am prepared to move the recommended motion.
Very good. Seconded, Councillor Thorpe. Any discussion? Not seeing any. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you. And the last item is H, the Nanaimo Legion bid to host 2026 and 2027 Legion National Youth Track and Field Championships. Mr. Harding.
Thank you, Worship. Another bid opportunity that's in front of us, working with both the Legion and with Track and Field and with Tourism Nanaimo. The interesting thing on this this bid, if we get it, which I think is very smart for an organization, is you actually get the 2026 and 2027 games. So when groups and volunteers are working to host the one event, then they learn from that, and then they're ready to host it again the following year. The implications here is for the bid is to ensure that the bid has $100,000 security for the bid, which would go over for the 2 years. So staff's looking for endorsement for the bid, as well as put in for the 2026-2027 budget, $100,000 to cover some of the expenses.
Thank you very much. Councillor Perino.
Your Worship, well, and again, here's one where you've got the Royal Canadian Legion involved, and it's like, this is one of those organizations, you just they're the best. I mean, we're so blessed in this community, so definitely I'd like to move the recommendation.
Seconded, Councillor Hemmons. Councillor Manley.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm really supportive of this, but I do have a question to staff. And under option 2, it says that if we decided to look at alternative funding, the disadvantage of this option with making any changes will not meet the bid package deadline of July 21st. Today's the 19th. I'm just curious about how long we've known about this bid package, because it's basically a decision where it's all or nothing, and so the option 2 is not really an option if we want this to come here. And I think that it would be hard to argue against this, because sports tourism brings a lot of economic dollars into the community. It's good for the business community. It's good for lots of different reasons. So I'm just curious about that deadline and how long staff has known about the July 21st deadline, and why it hasn't come to council sooner. Thank you.
Mr. Harding, please.
Your Worship, thank you to Councillor Manley. We found out, Parks, Recreation, Culture staff found out about 3 weeks ago of the project. It came to us from Tourism Nanaimo and through the organizations. And again, that's the issue of quickness on this. So our apologies for that. It is late. There is also a typo. I just wanted to make sure we make changes on the purpose of the report. It says Legion 151. It's branch 10 of the Legion. We'll have to change that. But back to the initial question, yeah, sometimes they do come to us late, and we try to get in front of council. We will still look to fund for the $100,000, but for the purpose of ensuring that the people reviewing the bed, that the community's behind it, we use the city as a City of Nanaimo to confirm that we'll have it. But we will still be working with the groups and organizations to fundraise for the other, to either cover this or to add to other aspects of the event.
So just to follow up, Your Worship, so this wasn't something we've budgeted for, and it'll be an increase to the annual budget. But I appreciate that staff will be looking at alternative funding for this to help offset that. So, thank you.
Your Worship, if I could say again, this is for us to secure the bid. If Council recalls, we did apply for the 2024 National Track and Field, and we had a similar request. We weren't successful in getting the 2024 Nationals, which we're really disappointed in not getting. But we will hope to go for that again. But it's similar. We'd have to ensure that when the bid organizations see a community, that there is commitment behind the community to host.
Thank you, Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. The question did just occur to me. I totally support this. I think this is a huge opportunity for our city, and I'd love to see it be successful. But your reference in the report, Mr. Harding, to the sponsorship, basically, I shouldn't use that word, should I, of Branch 10 Legion, I'm wondering if there would be a greater chance of success for the bid if the other Nanaimo Legion branch was also involved. And I'm curious if they have been part of discussions, because I think a joint support from the two branches would hold more weight. Could you comment on that?
Yes, Your Worship, to Councillor Thorpe. My understanding is both legions are involved, but one has to do the submission. But we can confirm that.
No, that's fine.
I do believe both are involved. Yes, both
Great.
are involved.
That's good news. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
It occurs to me that this is a Finance and Audit Committee meeting, and the deadline is tomorrow. And is this sufficient from your practical purposes that we make the commitment at the Finance and Audit Committee, even though it's, in theory, Council could change its mind on Monday? Ms. Gurry?
Thank you, Your Worship. So yes, you are correct. In theory, staff could move forward based on this committee's recommendation, and should Council not proceed on Monday, we would then have to pull it out of the process.
So no changing your mind, Council. Thank you very much, Ms. Gurry. All those in favor? And any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you very much. We have no other business. I didn't see a non-city worker council member attend this morning. There's nothing on the question period sheet.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn, Councillor Hemmons, seconded Councillor Perino. All those in favor? Thank you very much, everyone. Appreciate the work this morning.